We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Beis in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 71b. The Gemara is continuing to explain the Machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in the Brayso on the previous Amud. Beis Shammai Savri, Beis Shammai hold Nedarim Nami Sheniru La'oros Nisrokna Rishus La'av. The Nedarim that appeared before the Oros, the Rishus now goes to the father when the Oros dies. Umegas Gayas, and also Beis Shammai hold that it's 50%, meaning to say 50% of the neder is annulled by the father and 50% is annulled by the husband. Beis Hillel Savri, Beis Hillel hold Avia Ubala Achron Mefir Nedorel. It's her father and her husband together, her last husband together. They're mefer the neder, they undo, they annul the neder. Velo megas gayas, and it's not megas gayas. It's not that each one does 50%, but each one weakens the neder. And the Rosh explains, Amar Rabbi Nosson, Heinein divrei Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel omrim, Eino yachal lahafir, ulefimai da'asik va'azel svir le'lahashas. So the Rosh explains, the way the Gemara understands the Brayso is as follows. To say for Nami, that at the end of the Brayso also, b'shenesar sala'achar kimo b'reisha. It's the same case as the Reisha, in the sense that both are talking about where she is betrothed by somebody else. Umashalo pirshu atana, and the fact that the Tana doesn't explain that in the Seifa, mishum da'areisha usamech. The Tana is just relying on what it said in the Reisha. In other words, in both cases, we're talking about a situation where the husband died and she married someone else. Uvaha pligi, and here's the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai savri, Beis Shammai hold. Kevon sheniru la'oros rishon. Once the neder appears before the first oros, lo motzi oros achron lahafir. So the oros achron is not able to annul anymore. El nisrokna la'av bilvad. Beis Shammai hold that power goes completely to the father, and he alone annuls the vow. Beis Hillel savrin, Beis Hillel hold afilu nedarim sheniru la'oros rishon. Even the nedarim that did appear before the first oros, avia ubalo ha'achron mefir nedorel. It's her father and her last husband together. They're the ones that annul her vows jointly. Ve'ein ha'av yachol lahafir levado, and the father is not able to annul it on his own. V'hainu tanya kivasi de Shmuel, and the idea over here that we're saying that this supports Shmuel, how is it like Shmuel? Mimil say to Beis Hillel. We're going on the words of Beis Hillel, because again, Beis Hillel is the one that Beis Hillel say that it's the father and the last husband together that annul the vows, even in a situation where the vow was nearer, where it appeared before the first husband. That's the support from this Brayso for the opinion of Shmuel. And the Rosh continues, Umegas Gayas milsa achrisi. The Rosh understands that the idea in the Gemara of Megas Gayas is actually a separate statement. Umefarish lo shebishnei devarim nechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. And what the Gemara is saying is that Beis Shammai Beis Hillel have actually two arguments. There's another machlokus in terms of Megas Gayas. Kilomar, what it means is as follows. V'savri Megas Gayas. Beis Shammai also happen to hold Megas Gayas, meaning when you have a situation of both the father and the husband annulling her vows, each one is really annulling 50% of the vow. This is really going on the first part of the Brayso. To Katani, because what does it say in the first part of the Brayso? It says, Avia ubal ha'achron mefir nedoreh. It says that her father and her last husband together, they annul her vows. Hein divrei Beis Shammai. That is the opinion of Beis Shammai. The savri megas gayas, because Beis Shammai hold megas gayas, again, each one does 50%. Aval Beis Hillel savri, but Beis Hillel hold miklash kolish. What actually happens is that each one, let's say the first one that annuls her vows, he weakens the entire vow. It's not that he is annulling 50% of the vow in full, he's actually weakening the entire vow. Therefore, the father and the last husband, they are not yoresh, they don't inherit the portion of the first oros. And the idea over here is that in the Reish of the Brayso, since the father annulled her vows while the husband was alive, and then that first husband dies, so we say according to Beis Hillel that the father weakened the entire vow, both his portion and the portion of the first husband, and now that portion of the first husband cannot be inherited later by the father and the later husbands. They can no longer annul that portion of the vow. But the Rosh continues, Aval B'Seifa, but in the end part of the Brayso, now in the end part of the Brayso, it wasn't the father who annulled the vow, it was actually the first husband who annulled the vows, and then the first husband dies. So there, Lo Shayach L'Meimar Miklash Kolish. You can't say that the whole thing is weakened and it can't be inherited. And this the Rosh explained previously also, Kevon Sha'av Kayim, because the father is still around and he never annulled it. So the way the Rosh explained it earlier was it's like Derech Agav. Since he's able to annul his portion, because he never annulled his portion yet, so once he can annul that, so the other husband's portion as well can be annulled. Again, the Rosh says, like I explained earlier. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. They had the following question: Gerushin kishtika damya oka hakama damya. Let's say you have a situation where the husband divorces his wife. So is that just like being silent, or is the fact that he divorces his wife after he hears about the neder, is that like a hakama, as if he is upholding that neder? And the Gemara says, L'may nafkamina, what is the practical difference? The Gemara explains, Kagon, for example, as follows. Shenadra, let's say she made a neder. V'shama ba'ala v'girsha, and then her husband heard about the neder and he divorced her. V'ahadra biyomi, but then he returned her on that very same day, he remarried her. So, Iyomar mar kishtika dami, if the master says that it's as if the person was silent, so matzi mefarla, so he's still able to annul the vow for her. It's still that same day. He never upheld the vow, he was simply silent, and he can still annul it. V'yomar mar ka'akama dami, but if the master says that the divorce itself is as if he upheld the vow, so at that point, once there's a hakama, lo matzi mefarla, he's no longer able to annul it for her, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph.